So you know that your heart is actually in real estate investing, but you've got a W 2 and you're really not sure how you can possibly transition over to becoming a full time professional real estate investor. Well, we're going to hear a story about someone that did just that and more on today's episode of Ready to Scale. Hey guys, my name is Jeanette Friedrich. I am the Director of Investor Relations at Blue Lake Capital. And joining me today is Vessi Kapulian. She is the managing partner of DBA Capital Group. Previously, she was the senior vice president at Wells Fargo, where she oversaw a portfolio of international middle market clients and global commodity trading companies at the value of $1.3 billion. She has an MBA in finance from Northwestern's Kellogg School of Management, and she's joining me in good old Los Angeles, California. So, Vessi, welcome to the show.
I'm excited to be here, Jeanette, and thank you so much for having me on. I'm really looking forward
Absolutely.
to our conversation today.
I'm looking forward to hearing your story myself. I've only got tidbits, so I'm pretty much as going into this as blind as the audience is with us today, which makes it even more fun for me, actually. So let's dive in. So, very interestingly enough, you actually grew up behind the Iron Curtain, and essentially that's the former Soviet Union, right? So I would love to know, what specific experiences or challenges shaped your vision of the American dream, and how did those early ambitions actually evolve once you got to the US?
Yes, that was an instrumental part of my journey and shaping actually me who I am as an investor today. Very grateful for all the experiences, but it was a different time and a different, almost like a different world relative to where I'm at today. I'm originally from Bulgaria, so that was part of the Soviet bloc countries. And to think of the United States, or as we called it at the time, or even today, America, that was just the thought of even being here was something like a big dream far out there. But I'm also grateful for the experiences that I had growing up behind the curtain, because it really instilled in me through my parents and the habits and behaviors. They taught us to be fiscally responsible. I don't come from a rich family. I don't come from a poor family, right? We had shelter, food, the basic necessities on the table. But Bulgaria at the time, even shortly after the fall of the Iron Curtain, went through a pretty big crisis, and I know we're all fretting about 8-9% inflation. Let's talk about double-digit inflation and what that meant at the time, and waiting in line for basic necessities like bread and food. So it really forces you to be fiscally responsible, not to spend more than what you have. Along the way, as I was growing up, though, you always saw the movies of America and the image that you have. And I remember when our family got their very first radio, and at night I would tune in and listen to the Voice of America with Casey Kasem, and there will be music, different discussions, but also news. So that was my little window to the world. The first step was learning English so I could understand what they actually talk about, and really getting a glimpse of what life outside of the curtain could look like. And that turned into a dream or desire to study in the US one day. Um, Given the economic situation of the country that I very briefly shared about, as well as my family, the only way to make that happen is to earn a full scholarship. So I set my mind to focus on academics, and very grateful that I was able to achieve that by being admitted to a university here in the US. And that's how my journey here started. From that perspective, I would say it was a very traditional journey, in the sense that I went to school, I was striving to maintain good grades and eventually get a job, and that in and of itself felt like all of my dreams were coming true. But over the years, as I started climbing that corporate ladder of success, or so I thought, I felt like I could never catch up. I always felt behind. You got that next title, you got that next promotion, maybe a little bit of a bump in the pay, but on a per hour basis, I wasn't making more, especially since I was effectively sacrificing more of my time away from family and loved ones for money. So between that and a couple of corporate events that I can also talk about, but mainly revolving around corporate restructures, that's when the light bulb went on, and I asked myself, well, what if this happens to me tomorrow? And what if I'm 60 years old and here I am on the streets and with very low possibility of finding another job and
Mhm.
supplementing my income? There must be a better way. And I think at that point of time, those seeds that were planted back in Bulgaria years ago, as far as investing and hard assets, really started germinating. And that's what led me to do a deep dive and go into real estate investing.
Wow, very interesting. And thank you for sharing. And you actually hit it on the head. My next question, I was going to be asking you, why real estate? So, what is it that made you decide, okay, I don't want to just do this W 2 until they're either done with me or I'm done with them?
Right.
I want to, I want to use real estate. Why did you pick real estate?
Yeah, so for me, it was something more familiar. Growing up in Bulgaria, there wasn't a developed stock market in place. And so when people talked about investments, they often meant and referenced hard assets, specifically real estate and you could say commodities, right? And gold, silver, and typically in the form of jewelry. And I'm not even talking about cash flowing real estate. It was often real estate acquired over time and then passed on from generation to generation, but basically assets that hold their value. So I think in that moment of crisis, we typically revert back to maybe some of the habits that we have. Not that real estate was necessarily a habit, but it was somewhat familiar. In addition to that, I already had some investments in the stock market by virtue of brokerage accounts and retirement plans. But I also remember the '08 crisis, or before that, the Enron crisis, when the market collapsed. And uh, even to this day, the market feels like a roller coaster ride. Yes, those are more liquid investments, but they're not necessarily producing cash flow, which is what creates that additional cushion and peace of mind. They don't produce that additional income stream to supplement your W-2 job, but they're also more volatile. And I just, for that reason, that wasn't really an asset class that I was really willing to go deep dive on. But real estate was something more tangible, something I felt I could control. I could analyze each individual asset, each individual property without having to worry about how the accounting is done and what type of FASB and GAAP rules are being used and accrual basis and how transparent the financials are, things that one has to consider, right, as they read the public public statements of or financial statements of publicly traded companies. So yeah, it was a combination of um, what I was familiar with growing up, coupled with the level of transparency and control that I desired.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Now, a lot of people would stop at the thinking about it, and you decided to actually do it. So, when you decided, okay, I'm going to go for it, I'm going to start my own firm and I'm going to work my way towards transitioning out of my W 2, did you actually, put together a business plan and an entire strategy of how you were going to do that? Or did you decide to just wing it? Because I think that's something really important that people need to understand and will want to know. But first, let's have a word from our sponsor. Okay, sorry, fake commercial thingy. Okay. All
Yes.
right. So, Vessi, tell us, how do you do it?
Yeah, so excellent question. I everything in my life has been very gradual and incremental. So I wish I could tell you I went from zero to here, but no, that wasn't my story. And so my journey initially started very small. It started with a single family home, and the idea there was to build a small retirement nest egg that I could fall on in the event a corporate restructure or some unforeseen market event impacted my life. And living here in Los Angeles or in California, it became apparent pretty quickly that if my goal was to purchase an income producing asset, that would not happen here. I would have to look out of state for a number of reasons, just a function of the market here. I was determined to make a change because the last thing I wanted was looking back with regret one day and realizing that I should have started 20 years ago, right? And so the very first step I actually took was educating myself. There was through a real estate meetup, I came across a seminar that took place. It was a 2-day seminar here in LA, so I took time off from work. It ended up being one of those where they call you at the back of the room and try to upsell you on a coaching program. But the first half was actually very educational, where they did take the time to walk you through analyzing a property, how to vet the investment, things to keep in mind. And I walked away with a ton of notes and desire to take action. And so shortly after, through one of those meetups, I connected with an investor who would always present and talk about investing out of state. And he would always say, hey, if you have questions, call me. So I called him. And I said, hey, I know you talk about investing out of state. Do you know someone who sells properties? And sure enough, he did. And at that point of time, it just became a matter of taking action. I had done my homework on how to analyze the investment, how to analyze the market. To be fair, my job as a lender also helped from that regard. So I wasn't necessarily starting completely from scratch, although that was my first investment. And so over time, that worked well and it got me more comfortable. So I bought another investment, eventually moved from single family home to a duplex. And that's when the light bulb went on. And I realized, wow, this is not just some small retirement nest egg. This can be a full income stream, actually, potentially even a business that could, in the beginning, supplement my W-2, but eventually provide that much needed cushion in the event I got laid off or impacted by a corporate restructure. And as I started thinking about that, my next question was, okay, that's all great. So now how many single family homes do I need to buy? And when you did the math and you look at, well, at least 100, that's that's going to require a lot more time, a lot more capital. There has to be a better way. And that's when multifamily came into the picture. Very similar to how I started within the residential space. I did a deep dive. Of course, again, I had the background as a lender, but as an investor or an operator, you evaluate an investment from a different angle. So I felt it was important for me to educate myself from that angle and that perspective as well. So I invested deep in education as well, and taking action, right? Putting everything that I learned into practice. So that's how Dream Believe Achieve Capital was born over time. I wish I could tell you, hey, I cut the cord and things happened overnight, but it was a very slow, very gradual, very incremental journey. And each step I learned and then applied those learnings to the next stage.
Now, you just said something there that I definitely wanted to draw a little bit of attention to because I think it's absolutely lovely. So, DBA usually means doing business as, but I just heard you say, I believe it was Dream, Believe, Achieve.
Yes,
I
yes,
love it. I love it. DBA Capital. Love it.
yes.
Awesome. All right. Well, good. Thank you so much for sharing all of that and kind of, your growth journey through that. So I'm curious now, you got to leave your job about a year ago. And so what have been some of the most challenging moments during that transition? And how, what surprised you about the challenges during that transition that maybe people don't see coming that you can give them some advice on?
Yes. So Gosh, there's so much I have to share, and there have been so many learnings over the course of the past year. One is, first of all, that's a very personal decision, right? So before I made the jump, I consulted with family, but I also felt that I was prepared. In other words, I had a ton of reserves, which is extremely important, and I will definitely recommend it to anyone looking to make that transition. Secondly, over the course of the past several years, before I transitioned out of the W-2, I already had made a number of investments that were cash flowing, both active investments that I manage myself as well as passive investments. And so having that additional income stream that was effectively sufficient to cover my basic expenses was extremely helpful. So I knew that I could take the risk, right, of going into entrepreneurship full time. And as I thought through the downside as well, I thought, well, what is the worst that will happen, right? It's, let's say I fail, that's the worst that could happen. Well, I guess I'll humbly go back to a W-2 job, right? And
Hmm.
to have another source of income to support myself and my family. And when that became clear, I decided to forge forward. Um, so point number one is being prepared by building those income streams over time, as well as building adequate reserves for, personally, I would say at least 1 year, ideally more, to sustain you through that period of transition. Number two, I was always good with budgeting and planning, but it really hits you when that W-2 income stops coming every 2 weeks, or however frequently you get paid. You really need to zero in on your cash flow, on your monthly cash flow, because especially in the beginning, as you're building the business, the projects tend to be more lumpy in nature. In other words, the revenue is not necessarily ongoing. So you may get paid for a project, but let's just say in month one, but then the next quote unquote paycheck may not come 6 months later, right? So you have to
Hmm.
be really savvy about planning that. Um, Doing a lot of things on my own, right? When I was part of a larger corporation, we had a marketing department, accounting department, IT, you
Hmm.
name it. Now I am it. Which is great, because especially I think in the beginning you do need to be involved in all aspects of the operations, and eventually you figure out, oh, where is your strength, where is your what is the best use of your time, and everything that ranks lower you can then eventually start outsourcing. But in order to start outsourcing, you need to understand the process so you can properly train people. So that has been definitely a factor. And then um being in the driver's seat, which I enjoy, but it's what was the saying? You bring home what you kill. I don't really like that saying, because I'm a vegetarian, so, but I think a lot of people resonate with it. But it really is. You really have to be self-driven and motivated, and not all days are great, right? Sometimes you deal with rejection, or maybe a project doesn't go through as well as you thought it will. But you need to be present, and you need to show up 100% every day. Even when you want to cry, you still need to show up, because everything hinges on you. And in this case, it's not just myself, but also my family. So it really tested my resilience to a whole next level. So I'll pause here. I know I shared quite a few things, but those are the things that stand and come to mind as I reflect on the past year.
Well, they're very insightful. And also, I think, um, brutally transparent, which is great because, I think it's really important for people to be prepared in a realistic manner for what that takes. And, the courage to be able to do it too is, something that is a lot of people, don't have the courage. They just don't. And so, I think that when you can explain it in a very tangible and pragmatic way, people can be so much better equipped to be able to make that transition that they really do want to, but are just afraid to. So, thank you for sharing. Now, I am going to ask you also, I typically don't get into this on the show, but in case nobody's ever noticed, I'm a woman. Our CEO, Ellie Perlman, is actually a woman. And, Bessie, you're a woman. So, there's not a lot of women in this industry, particularly kind of at these levels, especially in multifamily industry. And so, what advice would you give to immigrants, especially maybe women who are trying to break into this business?
I think it really starts first and foremost with the belief that it's possible. And when I reflect on my experience, I'm really grateful for the role models that I had in my life. Granted, I guess it's more common in Europe to have women in politics and such, so I don't necessarily want to take that for granted because it was definitely a different experience. For example, when I arrived in the US to realize, oh wow, uh, you're a woman and you're in a different place. Why is that? That's that shouldn't be abnormal, right? But
Hmm.
surrounding yourself with positive, like-minded individuals and role models that show you that it is possible, and then believing that it is possible, just because we are a different gender or different nationality or come from a different socioeconomic background, um, doesn't mean that we cannot accomplish what we dream of and what we want to achieve. And taking action as well, being willing to do the hard work, because I wish I could tell you that things happen easy, but the reality is you have to grind, you have to do the work. Um, Surrounding yourself with the positive, like-minded individuals, getting yourself educated in whatever area you aspire to excel in, and then overcoming those fears by taking action, because that's the only way to make these dreams real and to realize these goals, is to actually get to work. I wish I could tell you there was a shortcut or some secret recipe, but um, there isn't. So
Yep, very true. Very true. Well, awesome. Thank you so much for such great advice and really just an inspiring story. I really, really love working with our CEO, Ellie Perlman, for the same reason that I just loved this conversation with you, because as an American, I sometimes recognize that I have taken it all for granted, all of it. I've never thought about it. And when I meet others that have immigrated to the United States and really genuinely hold dear the American dream and are able to aspire to it, I am so incredibly reminded again of honestly the greatness of this country and the opportunity and hope that it brings for people around the world. And so I never want to lose sight of that. And I love being reminded to stop and remember, be grateful for where we are, this country and what
absolutely.
it can do. Yeah.
Absolutely. I believe in the American dream wholeheartedly. And like many immigrants, myself included, right, you typically arrive with their two suitcases and a lot of hope, faith, and determination. You don't have to have connection, but if you're willing to do the hard work and really find also a way to help others along the way, then you can go really, really far. And that's the
Absolutely.
place to make it happen.
Love it. Love it. All right. Well, Bessie, we have now gotten to what we call the lightning round questions. So are you ready?
I am ready.
All right. So we've gotten to learn a lot about your professional background and your company and, things like that. But what do you actually do for fun?
So I like to spend time with my family. I think you had the pleasure of meeting my fur baby as well. So I definitely spend time with him. And as far as other activities, I really enjoy running. So I used to do marathons, full and half. Now I just jog for fun, but I love to work out and be outdoors.
Nice, nice. It's very common here in California. I've certainly noticed it's very nice to be able to be outside so much. I moved here from Boston where we were kind of like locked inside for months at a time. So it's very nice to be able to be outside year round. Now, what is something interesting about you that most people don't know?
Let me think. So I guess I'll share one of the two things that come to mind. I speak 5 languages, so apart from English, Spanish, German, Russian, and of course my native Bulgarian.
Wow, very impressive. All right. Now, what about a book? Is there a certain book that you've read recently that you really think is just great that you would encourage people to take a look at?
Yes, so if it's okay, I'll mention too, one of my all-time favorites and one that I reread often is Think and Grow Rich by
Hmm.
Napoleon Hill. And unlike the title suggests, it's not necessarily about physical riches, but more so about the power of mindset and the vision and having that burning desire to go after your dreams. And one that I read recently is The Power of Influence by Robert Cialdini, and I really enjoyed that one. It had a few really interesting points around connecting with others and how to build those relationships in a positive way.
Love it. Great. All right. Now, I do not need to tell you this, but I'm going to say it the way I usually do. So, what we talk about on this show is it's not just about money at all, right? It's about really being able to build and live an extraordinary life, which you have just shared so much with us about you actually accomplishing. So, to kind of summarize it all and wrap it up, what is your advice for our listeners today that are also striving to build an extraordinary life?
I would say, and it really goes back to the name of my company. There was a lot of thought put behind it, but I really mean it. It's dream, believe, achieve. Dream pertains to having clarity of goals, not only what you want, but why you want it, because it is that why that will propel you further during good times and that will pull you up during difficult times, which inevitably arise. Believe is surrounding yourself with positive, like-minded individuals and mentors who help you push through those fears and limiting belief. And achieve really pertains to taking action, because you could listen to 1,000 podcasts, read a ton of books, but if you don't take action, all these goals will remain unrealized dreams and hopes. So take action and make those dreams real.
Love it. Love it. All right. Now, last but not least, Bessie, if people want to get in touch with you, how can they find you?
The easiest way to connect with me is through my website, dbacapitalgroup.com. D is in dream, B is in believe, A is in achieve. My contact information is there, as well as a link to my calendar and a ton of complementary educational resources for active and passive investors.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really, really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for having me on.
And for those of you that invested your time with us today, thank you. I appreciate your time too and your thoughts. Please make sure you like, rate, and review the show. Leave us some comments, and we'll see you on next week's episode. In the meantime, be bold, be extraordinary, and keep moving forward. All right. And that's a wrap.
All right.
That was great. I love your story.